Hello everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Brown River Falls. This is really quite pretty. I've never been here before. I've seen photographs of it. A lot of people come here in the summer to go swimming. Now I was hoping that there might be a little bit less water because there's a lot of potholes around here that look really cool to photograph, like patterns in the rocks. And I was also hoping that I'd be able to wade across the stream here, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to do that unless I want wet feet, which I'm not really that keen on. So I'm going to try and take some shots down here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to come up with anything too original because there isn't a lot of room to move around. So anyway, we'll give it a go, see what I can come up with. It's really quite nice down here. There is quite a bit of forest around here, but it's all second growth, so it's not terribly inspiring. I don't find it inspiring anyway, but I do like the waterfall. So let's see what we can get. All right, I think I found a composition. I'm probably going to do some variations on this composition. What kind of bothered me about this whole scene was this log that goes right across the back of the falls there. So I've tried to integrate it as part of the composition. So I've had to get my camera quite high so that I'm including the whole log and not cutting it off at the back. Also, there's a little pothole here. I don't know how important that is, but I've decided to keep that in there as well. And then this bottom part of the waterfall, and I'm using quite a long lens to kind of try to compress the scene a little bit. I've also put on a polarizer, just a basic polarizer or circular polarizer, because as you can see, as I turn it, it's quite bright, especially in this area. So I want to create a bit of contrast between the rock and the water. Now, as far as shutter speed goes, what I've decided to do is I want a shutter speed of around 1/4 to 1/6 of a second. And because I'm using quite a long lens, I've stopped down to f/16. So the only way to maintain that shutter speed is to adjust the ISO. So in this case, I've gone up to ISO 400, and then I might do some shots at ISO 800 to bring the shutter speed up to, let's see, 1/8 of a second, ISO 640, 1/6 of a second, and so on. And then just pick the best one. But on the back of the camera, I think I really like the around 1/5 of a second or 1/4 of a second. So that's what I've come up with so far, and hopefully I can come up with some other variations. So I've come up to a little bit of a bench, actually, where I came down the hill here. And I think I might have found a composition. What I'm going to try and do is, there's some really great boulders covered in moss in the foreground, and they do have a little bit of ambient light on them, so I kind of play with that. And also there's some small cedar trees in the foreground as well. So rather than just get a straight shot of a waterfall, I'm trying to frame it with the blocks and the cedars. Now, the only problem that I'm faced with here is that the contrast, or the dynamic range, is huge, because the waterfall is reflecting kind of cloudy skies. It's very white, very bright, and of course I'm in the shade here, so it's very dark. So I think what I'm going to have to do here is take some shots with a shutter speed that reflect what I want the waterfall to look like. So, you know, a shutter speed, say, of, I don't know, 1/4 of a second or 1/5 of a second, and then take some images, same composition, with the right exposure of the shadowed area or the trees here, and then combine the two. So that should work okay. I'm also having to put on a polarizer because there's a huge amount of reflected light on the rocks, and the waterfall itself just looks very white and not much detail. So I want to try and get as much detail out of the background as possible. I think this might work, I'm not sure. I originally started where the camera is because there's some really great roots right here, but I think the waterfall is just too small in the frame. You can't really see it. And because we're kind of at a side angle, doesn't really show up that well. So I've got in a little bit closer to these foreground trees and rocks, and that way I'm able to see the waterfall a little bit better. Anyway, we'll try it out, we'll see. I'll show you the composition I have, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I've had to brighten this considerably so you can see what's happening in the foreground, but as you can see, I have these cedar trees, this one on the right side and then the one on the left, and then we have these mossy boulders kind of in the center here. Now I've taken the polarizer off for now so we can see what I'm doing here, but as you can see, if I expose for, say, the foreground, say about there, you can still see that the waterfall is quite overexposed, and also the shutter speed isn't what I want it to be. So ISO 125th, f11, it's 1/4 of a second, but that's without a polarizer. So if I put a polarizer on, that'll bring it down to about 1/2 a second. I probably want to stop down to f16, so it's kind of pushing it. So I'm going to have to do a few little different exposures. So if I expose for the waterfall, say there, you can see that the foreground is just too dark. The great thing is that because I'm using a medium format camera with such a large sensor, it probably won't be much trouble to get details out of the shadows without too much noise if I do decide to go with just one exposure. Anyway, that's the composition that I have. As you can see, because I'm at a bit of a side angle, you don't really get a great view of the waterfall. So it's more of an environmental type portrait to show you where the waterfall is in the surroundings. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. It looks kind of neat on the camera. The only thing that I don't like is there's a large tree that's kind of fallen at the back there. If it's somewhat distracting in the final image, I might take it out in Photoshop. I'm not sure yet though. All right, well, I think that's me for the day. This was more of an exploratory trip than anything. I really wanted to check this area out and see if there was anything other than just the waterfall. The river itself is quite nice, and I know there's some other little waterfalls around this area. I think though that, as I said before, I think this would probably be better with slightly less water, because all these really cool potholes in this area. And actually, as I look over behind the camera there, I can kind of see some that might make a good photograph. All right, as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. That'd be very nice. And if you have any comments, be sure to leave them down below. And as always, if you enjoy the content of my channel, be sure to subscribe. All right, everybody, till next week, bye for now.